Today's show is brought to you by Amazon. Please go to lookingbackpodcast.weebly.com. Anytime you want to purchase something from Amazon, click the Amazon banner. And out of whatever you buy, a small percentage comes back to us, and it would really help out the show. Thanks a lot, and enjoy this episode of Looking Back. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another episode of Looking Back, where we are going to look at a person. This isn't your typical history related at all. We're going to debunk once and for all a man by the name of Alex Jones and this so called theory that he has been espousing for years. And that theory is the global domination agenda, the so called New World Order. We'll get to that in a second. The first problem I have with Alex Jones, and as a caveat, I used to listen to Alex Jones every day several years ago. I used to believe everything that he said. I used to believe that 9/11 was an inside job. I used to believe in the existence of a quote new world order. I used to believe in all of that. Then I finally had enough. I started becoming paranoid. I started becoming afraid of everything. And I actually started to attack people who didn't believe the same thing that I did about a particular event, namely 9/11. So after a while, I took a break and I quit listening to him altogether. Then I finally realized that he's wrong about a lot of things, if not the majority of things that he says. Alex Jones stirs people up, and not in a good way. The fact is, enough people don't realize two things. Number one, Alex Jones is an entertainer, he's not a journalist. And number two, he's either crazy or he's a liar. I put it this way. If you can trust this man who said the Boston Marathon bombing was a false flag, the tornado in Moore, Oklahoma was a government weather weapon unleashed to promote carbon taxes, that the military is following him, then you need to take a moment and look at your worldview. The fact that he believes one of these, or all of them, poisons the well of his information. The fact that he's not even wrong or even right about anything, he shouldn't be trusted for any information. I mean, any at all. What surprises me the most is the number of people that claim to be advocates of the facts or, quote, truthers that tend to listen to him. They're willing to give him a pass on the misinformation, the unverifiable facts, the outright lies that he produces on a daily basis. Excusing it as entertainment or hyperbole doesn't change the fact that the bulk of what he does, his design, is to raise anxiety and to exploit a certain segment of the population by confirming that their fears are real. One thing that is purely offensive about this guy, when the Boston bombing happened, he claimed it was a false flag when some of the bodies weren't even cold yet. It literally just happened, and he went on and did a video about how it was a false flag. People say that he's gotten some things right. What I like to see is what has he gotten right? He intentionally misleads his listeners. Agenda 21 is one of the things that he's gone on about. It's one of the things that Glenn Beck has gone about for years. Agenda 21 is as threatening as the Kyoto Protocols. But people like Alex Jones claim we're signing away sovereignty and waves his arms like a wacky inflatable flailing armed tube man. Calling the Boston Marathon a false flag and the supposed air quote lockdown was absolutely false and it was alarmist. The disgusting claims that he made about Moore, Oklahoma, as the tornado being a government weather weapons test was again absurd and offensive to the people who were affected. He is a publicity hound who doesn't care who he hurts in trying to whip up ratings and paranoia. Or more recently, his disgusting insinuation that Sandy Hook was a false flag or some such nonsense like that is just wrong. I don't believe a word what he says. I don't believe for a minute he gets a lot of things right. There are people who say he gets a lot of things right. Like what? The sky is blue? One thing that Alex Jones has done, and this is something that really is just beyond the pale, just wrong. He has a product. I'm going to tell you about that in a second. Alex Jones supposedly has a warning for us. You see, the quote, global elite are putting lead and mercury and arsenic in our water, and we must take action now to protect your health. The solution? Buy a ProPure water filter to reduce and remove these levels of lead and arsenic and mercury and all these other demon poisons from your water. Curse those global elitists. Thanks, Alex, but there's a problem. He also endorses a drink called Beyond Tangy Tangerine, or as a friend of mine calls it, Tangy Tangerine What's It? Manufactured by a company called Global Longevity, and it has some interesting ingredients. Part of the ingredients listed: lead, mercury, and arsenic. Alex Jones is pitching a water filtration system to remove the very same chemicals found in the nutritional drink he wants people to ingest. But there's more. Here are some of the ingredients listed in Tangy Tangerine: chlorine, sulfur, aluminum hydroxide, arsenic, barium, bromine, cesium, copper, iron, lead, lithium, manganese, mercury, nickel, silver, strontium, and zinc. Those ingredients, bromine, copper, iron, lead, nickel, silver, strontium, and zinc, those ingredients are on the contaminants removed or reduced list for his water filtration system. He's pitching a system to remove the chemicals found in the drink that he wants you to drink. The ones: chlorine, sulfur, aluminum hydroxide, arsenic, barium, cesium, lithium, mercury. Those are ingredients that he has warned people to avoid because they're evil. Here's the big problem. The chemicals that he says are bad, he wants you to buy his favorite drink because he wants you to put those same chemicals in your body. The only thing that Alex Jones believes in is making money. He has weaved conspiracy theories out of both sides of his mouth to collect a paycheck from both sides of the corporate fence. When will his people and his fans wake up and realize how full of it he really is? We like to categorize and apply labels. It's something that we've done for millions of years, and that can be helpful to wrap your mind around complex reality as long as you avoid the pitfall of allowing labels to become mental straitjackets. There's a lot of discussion about various categories of people who are failing in one way or another to apply critical thinking. Those categories aren't meant to be dismissive, but rather to help understand various styles of thinking that lead people astray. For example, there are deniers, true believers, ideologues, and cranks. Perhaps the most interesting category is the conspiracy theorist. I find them to be the most consistent in their style of reasoning and argument, and I wonder, however, how much of this consistency is due to an underlying reasoning style, how much of it's culture. When I get the same fallacious argument over and over again, is it because they're all reading the same source material? When you talk about conspiracy theorists, we're talking about those grand conspiracies, the ones that involve large numbers of people, vast expanse of power and control, often sustained for years or even decades. Of course, there's no sharp demarcation between a small and plausible conspiracy and a grand conspiracy, but the larger the conspiracy would need to be, the more implausible it seems. The largest grand conspiracy simply collapses under its own weight. Of course, conspiracy theorists have to have learned about the conspiracy, but this entirely misses the point. They don't have actual evidence. They don't have leaked information, documents, photographs, or anything hard or direct evidence of their conspiracy theory. They simply believe they have a perceived pattern of events. Conspiracy theories are immune to evidence. They're closed, self contained belief systems that resist their own critical analysis. They're a mental trap. Conspiracy theorists are generally smart people, even if they lack certain critical thinking skills. Smart people, however, are good at rationalizing and erecting elaborate belief structures. This is a string of rationalizations, dismissed very serious and legitimate claims. But one thing I would like to point out is that responses from the thing with guys like Alex Jones, with any quote conspiracy theory, the burden of proof is not on the person who's listening. The burden of proof is on the person who is purporting this theory. And challenging someone with any kind of theory to make their case, to make them put their best evidence forward, is absolutely legitimate. Any claim can be analyzed for logical validity and plausibility. It is possible to find flaws in someone's reasoning, separate from the specific details of evidence. If someone tells you the world is run by lizard people and gives you a string of logical fallacies to make their case, you can determine that it's simply not worth reading through their 12-foot stack of evidence to support their position. With regard to plausibility, one common criticism of grand conspiracies is that the government isn't simply sufficiently competent to pull off any grand conspiracy. When it comes to guys like Alex Jones, and one thing that him and his ilk do very well, I might add, is this whole theory of global domination. For the purpose of the rest of this episode, I'll refer to the conspiracy theory at issue as the global domination agenda. There is not really, it's almost impossible to come up with a description of this theory that takes into account all permutations. However, the most commonly agreed upon features generally hold on to these three things. Number one, that a group of people, entities, business interests exert total or at least significant control over international relations, economics, media, and technology on a global scale. Number two, that this group has some sort of internal unity. Its actors are working in concert towards a common goal. And number three, that either the direct goal of this group or the effect of their goals is to consolidate power over all, most, or a significant portion of the world's people. Believers in this so called global domination agenda are the most intractable and unyielding of all conspiracy theorists. Many debunkers simply throw their hands up when confronted with a believer in this theory because it's virtually impossible to convince them that this theory is illogical and it's unsupported by evidence. Some people should try to analyze why people believe in this theory. What can be done to demonstrate that the global domination agenda does not exist? At its core, that theory is an assumption. Conspiracy believers assume that points 1, 2, and 3 are true. Once they make this assumption, anything else they see they'll interpret as evidence supporting the truth of points 1, 2, and 3. They think it's true because it's true. The circular and self-reinforcing nature of their assumption admits no outside stimulus that can either support or refute the points of the assumption. How do we know that a certain group of people, entities, business interests, exert total or at least significant control over international relations, economics, media, blah, 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 on a global scale? Well, because they do. And if you don't agree, you're a blind, brainwashed sheep. Well, then how do you know that this group has some sort of internal unity? Well, because they are. And if you don't agree, you haven't done your research. Well, how do we know that either the direct goal of this group or the effect of their goals is to consolidate power over all, or most, or a significant portion of the world's people? Well, because it is. You need to wake up. You need to become aware. It's a difficult point to grasp. And at the risk of making this more complicated, I'm going to attempt to explain it a little bit easier. Think of it like a pyramid. The global domination elite, we'll call them. Um, you can call them whatever you want. Illuminati, New World Order, reptilians, whatever. There would have to be connections of some type between the GDE and the people, entities, governments, whatever that do their bidding. Let's call that layer the action elements. We'll just say the government, Bank of America, the IMF, and the Rothschilds. Well, in order to prove that that agenda is true, you need to prove that each layer of the pyramid exists and that the connections between each layer. Without both one or two, the very idea of a global domination agenda collapses on its face. Believers in this agenda simply assume that one and two are either already proven or self-evident, or that can be proven by evidence that in fact does not point to either one or two. There are some statements they have that are just plain wrong. The first statement is the global domination elite deliberately created the economic crisis. Well, if you ask them to prove this, they'll offer either two kinds of evidence. One, links to news articles about wrongdoing by mortgage bankers, irresponsible economic decisions by governments or corporations, or trends about worsening economic conditions like foreclosure and unemployment. Or, number two, they will share statements of opinion made by other conspiracy theorists that the global elite or persons working for them created this economic crisis. But see, what's really happening is news articles about bad economic decisions or corporate malfeasance only prove the existence of the results, not the cause, not the connections between the various layers of this pyramid. That sort of evidence goes to prove only certain parts. Think about it. A CNN article about Acme Megabank, which made a series of disastrous loans between the year 2000 and 2008, when they should have known better, does not prove the connection between Acme Bank and the global elite. All it does is prove that Acme Megabank made a series of disastrous loans when they should have known better. An article about unemployment at 30% and getting worse, youth unemployment, does not prove the connection between employers who are refusing to offer jobs to young people and the global elite. All this proves is that there is a youth unemployment problem, but we already know that. Proving one set of connections and then the other does not work either. So, proving that the former CEO of Acme Megabank is now the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury does not make the connection, because you still haven't proven that Acme Megabank acted on the elite's orders to make those loans. You have to prove connection from the bottom up, from the result all the way up to the global domination elite. Statements of opinion or unsourced assertions by other conspiracy theorists simply proves nothing. It doesn't prove the existence of an elite. It doesn't prove the connection between the elite and what's known as action elements. All it does is prove that somebody thinks there are connections, but that's not proof that the connections exist. So these pieces of evidence are meaningless unless you already accept the assumption that the global domination agenda exists. Then and only then do they become relevant. This is another illustration of the point that these conspiracy theorists operate on a totally circular logic. Believers in the global domination agenda, when they're not providing, quote, evidence, will sometimes point to, quote, incriminating statements by people they believe to be part of the elite group, supposedly indicted as an admission of their true agenda. One of the favorites in this category is a speech made on March 6, 1991 by then President George H.W. Bush, in which he used the words, quote, New World Order. Now, supposedly this indicates an admission that the New World Order is real and it exists, and that Bush was one of the people trying to implement it. A lot of those people don't see the reality of what the speech was all about. He outlined his vision of a world following the Persian Gulf War. He does in fact use the words New World Order, but if you read the speech, it's clear he's not talking about world domination. He's talking about a vision of foreign policy, which ironically, ultimately, didn't come to pass. How then does this prove a global domination agenda? The Trilateral Commission and the Bilderberg Group do exist, but their existence does not prove the existence of a global domination elite or an agenda. Believers in that conspiracy theory will cite the evidence, the existence of these groups, as evidence of their claim. They ignore that the assumptions are being made. These groups really do have power, the characteristics that believers in the global domination agenda claim they do. The Bilderberg Group is a rotating conference of politicians, of business leaders, and intellectuals who meet informally to discuss affairs of the world. The members change frequently, but usually includes high-ranking government officials, CEOs. The Bilderberg Group has no official power. It controls no army. It can make no laws or enforce laws. It has no formal status. It's a think tank. Its members talk about what they think their country should be doing, but little else. Another one is the Trilateral Commission. It's a group of business persons who get together to discuss business relations between America, Europe, and Japan. Like the Bilderberg Group, it's populated by wealthy people who have a lot of influence. Also, like the Bilderberg Group, it has no official power, controls no army, can neither make nor enforce law. It has no formal status under any government of the world. Many believers in this agenda, this conspiracy theory, believe that groups like those are either elite or members of the elite. They cite the mere existence of these groups as affirmative evidence in favor of the global domination agenda. Where's the proof of control? Where's the proof of influence and power? Let's look at George H.W. Bush again. There's no doubt that he was a very powerful and influential person. Before he was elected president in 1988, he came from a very rich and prominent family. He had many connections to business and political leaders. He was ambitious at an early age. When he was in the White House, he commanded the armed forces of the U.S. and he exerted significant influence on the economy. But why was George H.W. Bush a powerful and influential person? Is it because he was a member of the elite? Or is it because he was from a very rich and powerful family? He had many connections among business and political leaders. He held significant positions of political and economic power. Is it possible for any person anywhere in the world to rise to a position of significant political or economic power or social status without being a member of the elite? If you answered no, you've just engaged in circular reasoning. George H.W. Bush is powerful and influential because he's a member of the elite. Because he's a member of the elite, he's therefore powerful and influential. Do you see the reasoning there? If you answered yes to the question, then ask yourself, how can you distinguish between someone who has political, economic power, or social status because he or she is a member of the elite, or someone who has that power status for other reasons? Chances are you won't be able to answer that question. We don't live in a society, or um, we don't live in a society without class or social stratification. There are powerful and influential people. Rich people and business interests do have influence on government and economic policy. But be careful that you don't make evidence that these things are true for evidence that a global domination agenda exists. And it's easy to do that, especially when you're accusing people of being members of the elite solely on the membership in a group or a family or because they held a particular office. If you're doing that, then you're again illustrating that all global domination agenda theories proceed from an assumption that's never questioned. There are four questions that people who believe in the global domination theory should ask themselves. The answers, or lack thereof in some cases, are revealing. The first question is this: think of a specific person that you believe is a member of the elite. What's your basis for believing that? If the global domination agenda exists, why has it taken so long for the plans to be implemented? If they exist, why are the elite so incompetent? Assuming the elite want to take over the world, what do you think they're going to do once they have it? A little something to think about. Can't say I'm right, can't say I'm wrong. I haven't disproven the existence of the global domination agenda, but I'm not required to do that. The people who believe in that agenda are required to prove that it exists, not the other way around. Until they can prove that it does exist, it's not rational to believe in it. That's why I am debunking it, because I have stated the global domination agenda is not worthy of belief. I don't expect conspiracy theorists to be persuaded by what I'm trying to say or what I've said. I do expect maybe one or two rational people will begin to ask questions about whether the existence of this agenda is really as self-evident as it seems. Believers in that theory will typically never, under any circumstance, question the validity of their assumption. Once convinced of its veracity, strangely nearly everything they see in the world seems to look like evidence supporting their assumption, when in fact it does not. I'm not required to disprove the existence of a global domination agenda. It's up to the believers of this agenda to prove that it exists. There's no evidence that the global domination agenda exists, so therefore, the agenda does not exist. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. And until next time, take care of yourself and each other.